time I speak to an audience, I have two goals in mind. The first goal is that I want to leave you as a 99th percentile person. So when you leave this room tonight, I want you to be in the 99th percentile of all the people in the world that know anything about globalism. And if I meet that goal, then somewhere along the line, you're going to have an oh moment. That's what I want. I want the oh moment. When everybody sits back and goes, oh, that's really important to me. Everybody has their own vision of what's going on in the world, and we're hit from every angle with disinformation, misinformation, and it results in confusion. Well, all of that is purposeful. As long as a people is confused, then they have a better chance of winning. So what I put together for you is kind of a survey course of what globalism is, how to recognize it, because it comes as a shining light. It comes as a very appealing kind of imagery. And once you've been able to understand what it looks like and recognize it, then you can watch it and see what it's doing. And it's really important that you understand that. I'm going to start off with a 7-minute video. What this video's purpose is to ramp us up to a new level. So then I can explain to you what they're really talking about in kind of a nutsy-boltsy way. The first video is something that I use often, and I've condensed it, because this is the portion of a speech that John F. Kennedy gave in 1961, in which he described the enemy. He described it. He did not prescribe it. He did not say this is globalism, but he described what he had learned about who the big enemy is that we face as a nation. A lot of people thought he was talking about the Soviets. He's not talking about the Soviets. He's saying this is covert. So I want you to listen to the way the terms that he uses to describe this enemy that we're facing today. Then we're going to go into Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the first time he used the term globalism, he used it, it was a New York, I don't know what club it was, but it was kind of an uppity kind of a situation where he's speaking to a New York club, and he says, our campaign is about replacing globalism with Americanism. So he was pretty tight with that. He wasn't over the top or anything like that. The next time he was at a rally, and he says, our campaign is about replacing a corrupt, and he gives a long description of what it is that we're fighting here. And so I put those together so that you can understand what he's talking about when he says a corrupt, and then keep on going, that's globalism. I put it side by side. And at the very end is the very end of his acceptance speech at the National Convention, where he says, Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo. And what he means by that is that this has got to be in our hearts. If we're going to defeat these people, we need to know who they are, how they operate, how to recognize them, and we've got to have it in our souls that we want to defeat these people. And that's what he's talking about. So without further ado, it's about a 7-minute video, but this will get us up on a different plane in our mind.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret is revealed.
We must replace the present policy of globalism with a new policy of Americanism.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exist for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. For those who control the levers of power in Washington and for the global special interests, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind. Our campaign represents a true existential threat like they haven't seen before. This is not simply another four-year election. This is a crossroads in the history of our civilization that will determine whether or not we, the people, reclaim control over our government. The political establishment that is trying to stop us is the same group responsible for our disastrous trade deals, massive illegal immigration, and economic and foreign policies that have bled our country dry. The political establishment has brought about the destruction of our factories and our jobs as they flee to Mexico, China, and other countries all around the world. It's a global power structure that is responsible for the economic decisions that have robbed our working class, stripped our country of its wealth, and put that money into the pockets of a handful of large corporations and political entities. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation, and this will be our last chance to save it. This election will determine whether we're a free nation or whether we have only the illusion of democracy, but are in fact controlled by a small handful of global special interests rigging the system, and our system is rigged. This is reality. You know it, they know it, I know it, and pretty much the whole world knows it. The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. We've seen this firsthand in the WikiLeaks documents, in which Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty in order to enrich these global financial powers, her special interest friends, and her donors. Honestly, she should be locked up. The most powerful weapon deployed by the Clintons is the corporate media, the press. Let's be clear on one thing. The corporate media in our country is no longer involved in journalism. They're a political special interest, no different than any lobbyist or other financial entity with a total political agenda, and the agenda is not for you, it's for themselves. Anyone who challenges their control is deemed a sexist, a racist, a xenophobe. They will lie, 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 and then again, they will do worse than that. They will do whatever is necessary. The Clintons are criminals, remember that. This is well documented. And the establishment that protects them has engaged in a massive cover-up of widespread criminal activity at the State Department and the Clinton Foundation in order to keep the Clintons in power. They knew they would throw every lie they could at me and my family and my loved ones. They knew they would stop at nothing to try to stop me. Nevertheless, I take all of these slings and arrows gladly for you. I take them for our movement so that we can have our country back. I knew this day would arrive. It's only a question of when. And I knew the American people would rise above it and vote for the future they deserve. The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. The only people brave enough to vote out this corrupt establishment is you, the American people. Our great civilization has come upon a moment of reckoning. I didn't need to do this, folks, believe me. I built a great company, and I had a wonderful life. I could have enjoyed the fruits and benefits of years of successful business deals and businesses for myself and my family, instead of going through this absolute horror show of lies, deceptions, malicious attacks. Who would have thought? I'm doing it because this country has given me so much, and I feel so strongly that it's my turn to give back to the country that I love. I'm doing this for the people and for the movement, and we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
The most important difference between our plan and that of our opponent is that our plan will put America first. Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
I tell you what, that video puts me in tears. And I just want to tell you that before you get to the next slide, nothing that he said in that video has changed. We don't know what he sees. But anyone who would stand up there and say what he did to the people who actually run this world, he has my support until the bitter end.
Yes.
So whatever he does, I know he's fulfilling the mission that he described in that video. So, I want to give you kind of a nutsy-boltsy, real accurate understanding of how globalism works. From the world level, the level of the entire world, down to the national level, down to the state level, and then down to the local level, so that you can look at it, and when you see it, you can call it out, because your elected representatives don't know crap.
Amen.
I'm so glad you're here. In case you win, this is going to be invaluable for you and anyone. So globalism, this is a definition that after a long period of analyzing a lot of different sources on all this, this is a definition that I put together that I think is probably the most accurate that I can tell you. Other people might have another definition, and it's going to be just as good. But globalism is the philosophy put to practice that international interests outweigh national interests, and that national policies should provide relief for selected international concerns, even while doing so may serve against national interests and the will of the people. The desired end result of globalism is the subjugation of national laws and boundaries and the establishment of a worldwide corporate governance over the nations. We're talking about a worldwide business that the nations give authority to in order to run world trade and issue the currencies. And so by the time you do that, you've given away all of your national sovereignty. Donald Trump is not going to come out and say all the things that he knows, because first of all, most people are not like you. They're not ready to hear it. And if he did say it, they wouldn't know what he was talking about. So he's going to talk in real specific general terms, like Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo. When he gives you a tweet, he's just giving you the tip of the iceberg of what it is he's dealing with on this. But I've been watching this man long enough to know, and by the time we go through this, you'll know that I know globalism pretty good. And so I recognize in the things that he says that he knows it a lot deeper than I ever did. So don't ever think that the guy is not on top of things. He knows exactly what he's saying. All right, globalism, this is what it looks like. It's It's all of these things here. It's all this attraction. It's bright, shiny objects. It's these things that draw people in. It's people smiling. It's everybody having a good time. That everything is always wonderful in a global world. This is how to build a global. Anytime you even see the term global, 99 out of 100 times it deals with globalism, even though you might not have recognized it to begin with. So it is, here it is, I'm just going to read a couple of these lines to you. How to build a global community. It says, read the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Well, that's not a Declaration of Human Rights. That's antithetical to human rights. It says, I'll read the bottom, pledge allegiance to the earth, rather than nationalism. Pledge allegiance to the earth? Isn't Earth Day next week?
Yes.
Somebody said Earth Day is next week. So we're supposed to have a holiday for the earth. You know, it's an inanimate object, I'm afraid. But this is what they do. They fill your mind with these images, and people lock hold of these images. Who has never heard of the term think global, act local? Anybody not heard of that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but has everybody heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this started back in the 1960s. And what they're trying to do is filter this ideology from the global down to the local level. And man, I'm seeing it big time over in Forsyth County where I live. And I'm just picking up on it over there because these are the kinds of things that I normally am dealing with. I'm not dealing with local politics, but I've been hit up with it broadside over there in Forsyth County. And so that's what I've been fighting. So that's, the imagery is all, it's all really attractive, and people get sucked into this and they look at it, they don't even know what it means, but just through practically the subordinating the senses over time, they bring this off. So we've got globalist schools, global education, global teaching, and global issues. Everything is global, 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 global. Everything that they're doing deals with the earth. And I'm a builder. We don't build by a Southern building code anymore. You know that? We build by the International Building Code. It's the International Code Conference that we build under. So we have to build under the same rules as they build in, I don't know, Europe. Everything has gone to an international basis rather than a national or state or local basis. We have global holidays. We got Earth Day next week, I just said. We got Global Oneness Day. We've got Global Community Day. And this is a term right here, that community term, that's one that's been put into, it used to be the departments of planning and development. Now it's planning and community development. They're using this term community because it's very close to another term, which I'll show you just a second. Globals emphasize community. Global communities, global communities, global communities, global communities, global community right here. Look at that. It says one world nation united under man. Very important biblically, scripturally, what they're talking about. One world nation under man. I'll show you why. So here it is. You got global community. This is where it actually goes to. This is where it ends up for operationally with the people. It ends up with this communistic control system where everything in your life is controlled. You're told what you can do, what you can't do, what you can eat, what you can't eat, what you can grow in your own yard, what your house has got to look like. Everything about your life is to be controlled. And that's how they can make sure that they get what they want while you don't get anything. That's what this is all about. So here it is, this high-tech imagery. I mean, you can put that on your wall and think, man, that's really pretty cool poster, or put it for framing. But the imagery on it is meant for a reason. It's meant to take your mind to a place it wouldn't go otherwise. So we have all of this fetish with the earth. look at this. The globe there, the globe there, the globe there, the globe there, the globe there. It's all this, it's anti-scriptural, this fetish with the earth that they're talking about. So remember, what was it, how the Grinch stole Christmas, you know? And you've got all these people, the Who's of Whoville, and they're standing around a Christmas tree because, you know, the story of the Grinch stole Christmas was that the things on earth really didn't matter. What mattered was our faith and our people and the love that we have for our community and all that. Well, that has become this. So any idea of any kind of biblical basis or scriptural basis for the operation of your own life and the lives of people around you, it goes toward this fetish, this understanding, this reality that the earth is what we've got to be protecting, not people, not our faith. We've got to protect this ball that's out in space. So one world united under God becomes, and that's freedom, has become one world united under man, which is the slide that I showed you before, which is nothing but slavery, because men don't know any other way left to their own abilities except to enslave other men. That's the history of the world. That's how this world works. So you've got this global community idea, or one world nation under man, really is talking about the onset and bringing in a communistic system. And I'm going to clarify my terms. I'm going to define my terms in just a little bit so you understand what I'm really talking about that. So you've got Global Community Day, 2013. I call it Global Communism Day because that's what it's going. And people don't realize it. They go, oh gosh, they're having a thing, Global Community Day down at the square. Let's go to that. Well, folks, there's something behind that, but if I told you, you'd think I was crazy. Well, I'm not crazy. That's where this goes. So here, you've heard about the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Global Initiative. Well, that's what this is right here. And curiously enough, the slides that you're looking at right now, I presented about 3.5 years or so ago. I've just added to what I did about 3.5 years ago. You weren't there that night because you had something to go to. So this is not new to me. It's new to a lot of people. It's probably not new to you, but it's so new to a lot of people that they don't see what this is, global. I keep telling you. Anytime you see these people talking about global this or global that or global warming, it's all this fetish about the earth that they have. But it's very attractive. You can see it's very attractive. And they get all these special personalities in here to talk to people in their meetings. You got all kinds of celebrities and they just have so much fun. Oh, let me let you in on a secret over here. And everybody wants to know what's he saying? What's he saying? You know, it just gets people interested in that. Is that Angelina Jolie? I mean, I don't even pay any attention to these people anymore. But that's what they do. They dangle. They dangle beauty in front of people in order to get people to come in and become a globalist. So that's what all that's about. And then Obama, people are thinking, you know, Obama is a Muslim, and he just wants to change us to a bunch of Muslims. Well, all that's part of it. But the bigger picture on that is that he's a globalist. He is working toward globalist goals, but he's using that vehicle, all the vehicles that he used in order to accomplish those goals, because this is a full spectrum of methodologies that are being used against the American people. King globalist right there. That's just it. You got Democrat, you got Republican, you got Democrat over here. All the ones at the very top. And I'm going to show you one that you probably don't know about. Well, you do, but I'm going to confirm for you a very high-level Republican who is a globalist in just a few minutes. But at the very top of the parties, there's no difference. It's just that these guys are appealing to that bunch of people, and this guy is appealing to that bunch of people, and together one of them is going to win. That's how they play the game. Mohammed Morsi, anybody know who he was? He is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now what happened in Egypt was Obama and the deep state and the shadow government that we're talking about in this New American Magazine instigated several coups of governments in Northern Africa and in Ukraine, but specifically this one was in Egypt. And I have a friend in Egypt. I asked him, I said, how did they pull this off? What did they do? He said it was all social media. So you remember seeing all those people in Cairo, like millions of people in downtown Cairo. They're all against the sitting government there until finally the government fell. Well, all that was done with Twitter. Well, who can get in touch with every Egyptian in Cairo and send them a tweet? Well, it's just the people who own Twitter and can affect the messaging that, hey, there's going to be, we're going to get together at whatever square this is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And 1 million people come out there. That's what happens. That's how they do this. Well, this guy got elected as their president, and he started putting in Sharia law. Well, Egyptians are a pretty secular bunch by and large, and they're like, we don't want this. And finally, that he got taken out of power by the Egyptian military, which really made Obama very, very unhappy about all that. He got taken out. Now he's been sentenced to death. I don't know if he is. He's still around with us or not. But
He's still in jail.
He's still in jail. But he's been sentenced to death by the Egyptians because they finally had enough of this stuff. But it wasn't a democratic decision. It was electioneering by the deep state, by the intelligence agencies. They've gotten very, very, very good at this. Okay, the Clinton, this is global training. You know, how do you change an entire generation of people? You start educating. And you start educating them young. That's what Common Core is, you know. They've got a hold of us at that level. So the Clinton Global Initiative has its own universities, and so it's just pervasive through our culture. So here it is, you've got all these globalist colleges, and they're always so happy. This is something they put out there and say, oh, this looks so fun. We need to be part of that. That's a great thing to be involved with. And look at these people. Aren't they happy? Happy. So here's Fort Valley State. I found this when I was doing this. Global Initiatives Council. So here it is. They got a bunch of college kids, and they're coming up with these Global Initiatives Councils to be able to get their minds thinking globally and ultimately with the idea of acting locally. So Global Academic Councils, dreaming global, doing global. And don't you know that when that picture was done, Bill Clinton was gone. He's not going to hang out with these people. I mean, he's not going to be sitting there with these people. I mean, that's just not going to happen. But look at the cosmopolitan look here. You got a white guy, you got, I don't know, Indian, black person, another black, Muslim. I don't know what he is, but you know, it's trying to integrate the ideas that a nation of people is not what we need to be. We need to be interacting. We need to have all cultures coming together into a melting pot, which is fine if it just happens. But you know, it's just fun. Global Wellness Community, UN, GIF. We're going to be talking more about the UN. Global Initiative for Asthma. I mean, everything. They've got global stuff for everything. Global Initiative for Goodwill Industries. Globalists Against Punishing Your Children. Globalists for Muslims. Agenda 21. That's what this is down here. The sustainability ratings. I mean, it takes a lot of money to put a program like this together, you know? And globalist education, that's Common Core. Globalist peace initiatives. Interesting they talk about globalist peace initiatives because everywhere the globalist goes, there's nothing but war. That's what this is all about. Because war is very profitable for corporatists who are globalists. They got Earth Day, which is coming up next week, stop global warming, all this, again, the fetish with the world, the earth, the global. All right, this is when it starts getting very interesting here, where you got global community, earth government, global constitution, global parliament. That one caught my eye when I saw that one. I said, okay, all I had to do was just do a Google search for global. I mean, and then images. All these start coming up, and they start saving them and putting them into these. But this one was very, very interesting. All right, and we're going to get into that in just a second. All right, this is the king globalist right here. That's George Soros. Now, personally, I don't think it's his money. I think he's just a conduit. I think he's got the name. He's the one that they funnel all this through. The reason why I think he's a conduit is because globalists are inherently cheap. He's not going to be putting all his money, he's not going to be spending millions and millions of dollars to just put into all these different affairs. It's his money? No way. He's just a conduit, I believe. So he says, a global society, this is key to understand what it is that they're trying to do here. This is a quote from him. A global society does not mean global state. So this is not a nationalistic or even an internationalistic state. This is not a form of government. It's a form of governance. It's different. To abolish the existence of states is neither feasible nor desirable. But you kind of see where he's going. Okay, we're not going to abolish it. We're just going to overrule it. That's what he's talking about. But insofar as there is a collective interest that transcends state boundaries, okay, we're talking about the collective. Whenever you're talking about that, you're talking about socialistic, you're talking about communistic, we're talking about interests that transcend state boundaries. The sovereignty of states must be subordinated to international law and international institutions. We're going to be talking about what these international institutions are in just a minute. So compare his definition for globalism with the one that I came up with. The belief put to practice that international interests outweigh national interests. Up here we're subordinating the interests of the nations, and that national policies should provide relief for selected international concerns. That's those interests right there. Even while doing so, it may serve against national interests and the will of the people. The desired end result of globalism is subjugation, that's what this is, of national laws and boundaries and establishment of a worldwide corporate governance over the nations. We're essentially saying the same thing, but this is for this group of people, whereas he's talking to his group of people, and he's trying to hide certain things that he's trying to do here. So there's George Soros, and his big company, his big corporation is the Open Societies Foundation, where they're building vibrant and tolerant democracies. Notice in all these European democracies, they have a parliamentary government. You know why that is? They have a parliamentary government because then they don't have to have a majority in order to rule. They don't have to have a majority opinion to actually take over the government. They just have to have a sizable minority and a bunch of swings in there to then say, if you do this with us, then we'll do this for you. And that's why they do this. It's easier to get things done in one of these, and that's why Europe is so far to the left, whereas America hangs in with our Constitution by grim teeth here. All right, now the reason why I put this in here is because a couple years ago, the more and more I think about this, Doug probably didn't know what he was doing. But Doug Collins got invited out to Los Angeles to meet with a bunch of globalists. And a friend of mine says, hey, you probably ought to take a look at this. And so I did. I dug deep into it and found out that he was going to sit down and talk about the TTIP, which is kind of like the Atlantic version of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's a Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. So these people, the German Marshall Fund and the other one I'm going to show you in just a second, their idea was to try to get a bunch of Germans who were been pushing against the TTIP and a bunch of American congressmen together, put them in a room and try to feed their minds into why this is a really good idea. So what you have here is them notice that we're talking about the TLN, as the Transatlantic Inclusion Leaders Convene. The TILN is possible due to the partnership of the U.S. Department of State, the German Marshall Fund, who is these people, and the Open Society Foundation. That's George Soros right there. So we got the U.S. Department of State partnering with George Soros to try to get a bunch of American congressmen to go in and agree to the TTIP. Well, you know this can't be good for America if it's the Open Society Foundation pushing this. Here's some more information. You got the German Marshall Fund up here, Robert Bosch Stiftung, that was the other sponsor of the event. And they're talking about these different parts. The reason why I put this in here is so that you could see the connections between Soros and these organizations. The Open Society, there's the German Marshall Fund, there's Robert Bosch on official Open Society Institute documentation. There's partnership between German Marshall, here's the Open Society. So I've made the connections. That's what this was. Whether the congressman that went out there for this knew what it was at the time, I don't know. I really don't. Again, just making more connections here. And what they're doing, I didn't show you this. Okay, what they're doing right here is that TLN is proving to be transformational and inspiring young leaders to run for higher office. So they're sponsoring people to run for the U.S. Congress. That's how they've got all this money, and they can send people, they can get people elected to our Congress to do un-American things. That's what they're trying to do here. Oops. Congress Bundestag Forum, that was the event out there in Los Angeles, brings together young, newly elected members of German Bundestag with their counterparts in the United States House of Representatives. It's held annually. So here's, Doug's new to office, and the other guys are new to office. Hey, let's get them before they might figure out what's going on. Let's put them in a room together and see if we can't get their minds changed. This was just one of the itinerary items that was on the official paperwork here. All right, so here's the very real danger. I remember when Obama was elected, the very night that Obama was elected for the first term, Mitch McConnell went on the air and they were asking him, what do you think that you'll be able to work with Obama on? And he said, I almost got the quote verbatim, he said, trade agreements. Republicans love trade agreements. Well, what he was talking about was the TPP, the TPIP, and another one that's labeled TISA. I can't remember what it says. And the crazy thing was that early on, even Rand Paul has now publicly embraced the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Even Rand Paul was succumbing to this stuff, thinking, well, this must be pretty good, I guess. So these guys, now he changed pretty quickly in here. Mitch McConnell, they would all love to have gone back to this. So, to explain to you what the TPP and the TPIP and TISA really are, I want to show you kind of 5 items that are included in what I'm calling globalism. Globalism is that belief that the world it should subordinate all national concerns here. So the first level, and really at the bottom, even though it's going to be on the top of the screen, is liberalism. All right. Now, practically everybody talks in terms of conservatism and liberalism. On the radio, on the TV, he's a liberal, I'm a conservative, and when you're running for office, I don't know about you, but when you're running for office, if you're a Republican, you always put conservative there. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the only reason why you have a conservative is to give legitimacy to the idea of liberalism. Because all this is a suspension of rational thought processes. Liberalism is where you can look at a group of words here that make up a sentence, and it means something other than what the words say. Let's take the U.S. Constitution, for instance. The Constitution to these people doesn't mean what it says. It means what someone says it says. You can't rely on just reading it yourself. You have to rely on someone else to tell you what those simple words mean. Well, that's what liberalism is. They've created this idea that everything is relative. There is no absolute truth. All truth is relative. Your truth may be different than my truth. It's all different. Well, that's what liberalism is. And it's a form of warping the brain into believing just crazy, crazy things. Any liberals in here? No. All right. The next step up the ladder is socialism. Now, once you warp the brain, you created these people that really can't think straight, at least politically. Then the next thing you do is you try to suspend individuality, the pursuit of self-interest in the favor of state interest. Okay, they all automatically are not dealing right with their own self-interest here. Well, let's just tell them that the best thing to do is you're not important. What's important is a greater good, a greater vision of what this world can be. That's what socialism is. And so we need to subordinate your individuality and your pursuit of self-interest in favor of state interests. And so now they have this constitutional doctrine that they've even created that's called compelling state interest or compelling government interest. It's born out of this idea that the government itself is a party in the transaction. The government itself is an individual. It has its own personality, its own likes and dislikes, and we've got to consider what the government wants rather than considering just what the people want, even though the government is just a thing, it's a set of rules. But when you don't understand rational thought processes in the first place, then you believe that it's not just a set of rules, the government is a person. We need to consider his feelings here. The next step up is communism. And there's only one reason for communism that I can think of, and I've thought about all this a lot, you can probably tell, and that is to enforce socialism. All right, once the people finally figure out, hey, this isn't working for me. I'm really miserable here, and I don't want to do this anymore, and people kind of break out of that thought process and look for another way of life. We've got to have some way to enforce it. Well, communism is the police state. It's the surveillance state. It's the prisons. It's any way that they have to control you. It's even the mechanism to decide what your house looks like, where the government tells you what color you can paint your house, or where you can have a flag in the front yard, or practically any of these crazy things that we've been seeing on the news. That is stepping into the enforcement mechanism of socialism, and that's what communism is. The next step up we're going to go back and look at in just a second. See, none of this stuff will pay for itself. Socialism is not going to pay for itself. It takes a lot of money to build the prisons. It takes a lot of money to build the surveillance state. But there's no way to pay for all that stuff unless they have an economic engine. So what they created here, and you can see it really good in what used to be called communist China. Yes, it is communist, but they've got a corporate economic engine like nobody's business over there. And that's what's powering them to be able to control all of these things. Then on top of that, that's when you get to globalism. And globalism is a parallel construction to this one right here, where globalism suspends state interests in favor of global interests. So you suspended individuality and self-interest in favor of state interest right here. So all this does, it takes it to the next step. Okay, by the way, the country thing, don't worry about it. Open borders, we're not gonna keep anybody out here. This is all, everything is good. Come on in, and that's how they do that. All right, so now I want to take it back to the corporate fascist economic engine to explain to you what that is and how it works and how they want to make it pervade the entire world. Okay, first of all, I want to explain what corporate fascism is. You've heard the term corporate fascism, probably. Well, it is a system by which the people's government over time becomes so heavily influenced by corporate special interests, interests who have the means necessary to purchase influence at the very highest levels of the people's government, that the government is for all practical purposes eventually taken over by those corporate special interests. At that point, the government becomes almost solely a tool of corporate special interests. Now, if that's not what we have in Washington, D.C., I don't know what we do. They've created laws to where it'll restrict how much I can contribute to the campaign of one of my favorite candidate, but yet corporations can put all the money they want to. They can create their own PAC. As long as the money comes out of the PAC, then it's legal. So the corporations just put their money into a PAC, and then the PAC funnels millions and millions of dollars into selected campaigns, and that's how they do it. Well, we live in a corporate fascist state. That's how they were able to accomplish that. All right, so this is the model. We talked about the TPP, TISA, and the TTIP. Look at all these nations here. These are the nations of the TPP, and they're all common with the United States. The United States is in the middle of all these. If the United States is not there, they can't do it. So the whole thing breaks down as soon as the USA is not in there. But notice one set of nations is not in here. You know, the largest continent on earth, Africa, is not here. There's a reason why they don't want to be partners with Africa. Africa is their gold mine. Africa, that's why Africa stays so poor. It's because it's nothing but a mine for these people to get all the raw materials that they need, print the money out of the air, and convince their local leaders to accept the money that they print out of the air and extract all the resources. So Africa's not part of this. Well, Gaddafi wanted to make Africa significant. Gaddafi was creating a gold-backed currency that all of the nations of Africa would require if you want to buy their stuff. Well, why do you think they took Gaddafi out? Well, when that happened, nobody's organizing the gold-backed currency anymore. That's what all of that was about. All right, so in the middle of this economic engine, that's what this is here. In the middle of that, that's the central banking system. It's the world central banking system. It is the Federal Reserve, it's the ECB, it's the Japanese Central Bank. It's all of the central banking systems because they're really just one system. And if say the Federal Reserve can't can't buy bonds, then they'll get the Japanese Central Bank to buy bonds. Whatever it is, they all work together in order to keep this system going. So in the middle is a central banking system, and it is predominantly centered in New York, in Manhattan, in Wall Street. Then outside from that, what happens is that they loan currency into the world. Now, you may or may not know this, but I'll repeat it for the umpteenth time of talking, but all of our dollars, all of our money is loaned into existence. There's no dollars that just come out of the air and start circulating. They all have to be borrowed. And so every dollar that you have, either you borrowed it or someone else borrowed it and paid it to you. But all the money that circulates in our money supply is borrowed at interest, and someone is paying the interest on all those dollars. And then when they go back, after they pay off a loan, the dollars cease to exist. That's how it works. But this is on an international scale. So you've got this international central banking system, and they're loaning currency into all these nations here. Well, the next step is it's all got to be paid back. So they've got a debt service coming back to them. So this is the way that the system works, the way the system operates. So there's always got to be more and more and more currency that's being issued in order to pay the interest on the currency that's already been issued. That's the way the system works. It's a complex system, but it's a very simple idea. It's a Ponzi scheme. That's the way that all of these international banks work. So the way that you destroy this is simply cut it off. You cut off the funding to this. If these guys don't own the franchise to operate these central banks, and say all of a sudden all these nations, they started up with national currencies that didn't have to be paid back to banks, well, that means this whole system breaks down and the funding mechanism for globalism worldwide breaks down. Well, we're going to see that that's essentially what Mr. Trump has been doing. He's been doing that right there. He's cutting them off. He's cutting off the oxygen to the system. But unless you know what you're looking for, all of these decisions he's been making, you would never make the connection that this is really what he's doing. Okay, now before we go into that, I want to take you back to the state and local. We've talked about worldwide and the national level. So let's talk about this think global, act local idea again and see where that kind of goes. All right, back in 1976, there was a convention of a bunch of the United Nations conference in I think this was in Vancouver. And this is part of a document that Kim Fletter is the one who turned me on to this. She sent me a list of things to look at. And so when I do, this is what I come up with. Yep, I know exactly what to do with this. So this is their idea. This is the United Nations idea in order to minimize the amount of private ownership of land. Remember, we're talking about the earth here. Everything is about the earth. You know, subjugate men, but keep that earth, man. We got to keep the earth going here. So it says, this is talking about public ownership. It says private land ownership is also a principal instrument for the accumulation and concentration of wealth. Imagine that, a capitalist society. And therefore contributes to social injustice. See, you've heard of social justice and social justice warriors. You've heard of that term? See, that's the way they justify all of this. They justify subordinating you because you have more than Fred. And so because you have more than Fred, that's not just. So that's this warped kind of thinking. So it all boils down to social justice. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of developmental schemes. That term development, you got community development, planning and development, these terms are laced throughout here. Social justice, urban renewal and development, the provision for decent dwellings and healthy conditions for people can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. They want your property. Instead, the pattern of land use should be determined by the long-term interests of the community. Public control of land use is therefore indispensable to its protection as an asset and the achievement of long-term objectives of human settlement policies. Human settlements? I mean, are we talking about going to Mars or something? I mean, we're all human, but just look at the terms that they use. They're classifying us as animals in this. That's what I get out of it. Maybe you get a different impression here. So public control of the land is therefore indispensable to protection of the asset and the achievement of long-term objectives and human settlement policies and strategies. Appropriate legislation defining the boundaries of individual rights and public interests and suitable instruments for assessing the value of land and transferring to the community. So this was set back in 1976. The next thing that happened was in 1992, there was this big UN conference of all the nations, of all these eggheads that went down there and started talking about how they're going to do all this. So they decided that their best thinking was to create this idea of the earth is not sustainable unless we plan for it in advance. And so they came up with a sustainable development ideology. That's really what it is, in order to promote sustainable land use planning so that the earth will last through the human settlements that have been taking it over. So you've got to minimize the human settlements to maximize the earth here. To encourage the communality or communally and collectively owned and managed land. So they're trying to take your land, they're trying to take your personal property rights away from you. So this one, I fast forward, because I want to show you, I'm going to back into it in just a second to show you why. But you've heard of the, say the North Georgia Mountain Regional Commission.
Yeah.
You've heard those terms before, regional commissions and regionalism. Well, that was born out of this idea from the UN that if they're going to get globalism down through the national level, down through the state level, down to the county level, there's got to be another level in there to be able to communicate all of this ideology across the counties, and that's what this is. So regionalism in all the Georgia regions in here, and the Appalachian region, is all part of a UN idea that they formulated. It says United Nations regional commissions have a significant role to play in promoting sustainable development in their respective regions by promoting peer learning and cooperation, including south to south and triangular cooperation and effective linkage among global, regional, sub-regional, national processes to advance sustainable development. In other words, that's what I just said. They got this idea, and they want to have this big global beast. That's really what it is, Sam. It's this beast that they've been building here, but they got to get it down at the local level. So in 1992, this was 1992, right there. Right after that happened, that was in June. In June, end of June, here's Bill Clinton came out with his Executive Order 12852. The President established the President's Council on Sustainable Development. So for the next 8 years, after he took office here, this Presidential Council on Sustainable Development promoted and infiltrated this ideology into every federal office in the United States government. That's why the EPA went so batshit crazy. That's why they went so nuts with all of these crazy regulations. Because they got to protect the earth. You know? We can't let somebody's we can't let a spring on somebody's yard. They can't live there because we've got to protect the spring. You know, and everything about it. It's this crazy ideology. So he puts this into effect, and then in 1989, I think this was. This is the creep of globalism into state and local government. This is the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, the DCA. This is on their website here. The Georgia Planning Act, which was in 1989, at the end of this period where Bill Clinton, he established sustainable ideology into all of these facets of the federal government. The Georgia Planning Act, I don't know, why our Georgia representatives would have sat down there and gone along with this. Normally it's because they're going to get funded if they do. That's why they did this. Georgia Planning Act, the DCA gives DCA the authority to establish standards and procedures for appropriate and timely regional planning by regional commissions in Georgia. So that's where all the regional commissions came from. These standards and procedures are embodied in the rules known as the regional planning requirements. In order to remain eligible for state funding programs, each regional commission must prepare, adopt, maintain, and implement a regional plan that meets these planning criteria. So they do it out of the funding. So in order to remain eligible for state funding, each regional commission must prepare, adopt, maintain, and implement a regional plan. Well, that includes your county comprehensive plan. Have you heard the term comprehensive plan at your county level? You have one. If you have not heard it, you have a comprehensive plan. And that's what this is. This is part of the law. I took this out of the law. Rules for Department of Community Affairs, Chapter 110.12, minimum standards and procedures for local comprehensive planning. So this is statewide. Every county has got to do this. Doesn't matter how many people, it doesn't matter. You've got to have a comprehensive plan. So the review of the comprehensive plan says upon completion, the comprehensive plan must be transmitted to the regional commission for review. Both the regional commission and the Department of Community Affairs will review the plan and respond to the local government with findings and recommendations. They don't get their money until they resolve the findings and the recommendations. Once approved by the department as being in compliance with the minimum standards and procedures, the local government may adopt the plan, and that's when they get the money. So that's how they do this. That's how they've taken this idea of globalism that we've been talking about, and they've hoisted it down on the state level and the city level too, because it's the same thing with the cities. So now, I found this interesting because I started looking into the background of the planners over in Forsyth County and their accreditation and all that. Well, these guys are all a member of the American Planning Association. Now, if you go to their website and you just do a search for the term sustainable, as in sustainable development, I found 2,000 web pages on the American Planning Association website that use that term. So obviously, the planners, in order to get a degree, or certainly an advanced degree in urban planning anywhere in our country, in fact, if you went and surveyed the entire world, they're going to have to be steeped in this sustainable ideology. That's what pushes them. That's all they know, and I'm finding that out really, really well at our county level. That's all these people know. They don't know how to operate in any other mode because they have been steeped into this ideology here. So let's go back to this. The same idea of the TPP and the funding and all this, this is the same way that it's got to be destroyed. The only way that they can keep our state enrolled with this is through the funding. Well, if we say we don't want the funding, then they can't control us. That's how you try to get out of this thing. All right, so Donald Trump has been doing so many fantastic things for our country, but most of what he's doing has an ulterior motive. Most of the big things that he's doing have an ulterior motive to them. And they're all in trying to starve this beast of the oxygen it needs in order to function. That's what I recognize in all of these. And so I'm going to go over with some of them. There's more of them that I had you put down here. Well, Donald Trump's trying to make peace. Look at what's going on in North Korea. Now, you can say what you want to say about Syria and all that. But again, with that, you don't know what Donald Trump knows. And you don't know exactly what it is he tried to do or what he actually accomplished, because there's a lot of evidence out there that he actually did accomplish some things that are now being exploited with that, and we'll go over that in just a second. But globalists make their best profit off of war. When you destroy things, you got to rebuild them back. And you got to replace them. Well, you destroy a bunch of stuff, you got to keep doing that. Well, that's real profitable for whoever produces it. So Trump is making peace and preparing to bring home the American troops from the Middle East. Now watch and see what happens. Have you been hearing about him making this big parade in Washington, D.C. next Veterans Day? Anybody heard about that? Well, that's something I'm very interested to see, whether he's actually going to make, because that's 2 days before the national election. It's on the Sunday before the Tuesday, the second Tuesday in November. And I'm real curious to know whether he plans on bringing home a lot of the troops that the American people have been clamoring for and put them in parade in Washington, D.C. right before the election. We'll have to watch to see if that happens, but that might be what he's doing. Globalists fund the deep state operations of controlling world trade, drug trade, out of Afghanistan and laundering their profits. Trump has been cutting off their access to the opium they need to run that operation. That's what he's had the troops over there. They're destroying the fields from which opium is derives. The next thing he's doing is building a wall. Now, anybody ever heard of QAnon? Been hearing about Q a little bit? I'm going to show you a little bit about Q in just a minute. But you can go to a website that's called the History of Q, and you can see a little bit of what I'm going to show you up there. Ever since October, there has been a presence on this deep web presence. It's called 8chan or 4chan, where anybody that puts posts on it, they remain anonymous. Well, Q has started back in October putting posts out there, and they keep coming true. And one of the things he always says is that the future proves the past. And so he'll put something out maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago or a month ago. Well, next thing you know, it's happening up in here. So there's I have a pretty high level of confidence that Q is likely members of military intelligence, because we've got 3 major intelligence groups. You've got military intelligence, that was General Flynn. We have the FBI and we have the CIA. We know the FBI and the CIA, they're all compromised. But the military intelligence, not so much. So those are the folks that Trump is relying on, the military intelligence, and then Q appears to be one of them. Now, building the wall, what does that do?
Spell that. Q.
Q.
You want Q?
Q. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Q.
Okay.
Or some people call it Q anon, but you can go on YouTube.
Stands for query.
Okay. I didn't know if it was CU.
But it's also a high level security. Q is the highest level of security clearance, I guess it is.
What was the website again? What was the website again? Q?
History of Q.
Oh, history of
The History of Q, I think is what it is. And there's a lot of them out there. And you can also just look him up on Facebook, because I mean, not Facebook, but YouTube. There's a lot of folks, just like you and me, that look at these things on a daily. They normally come in at night, and they're analyzing it. So you can sit there and kind of listen to what they're doing and kind of pick up on how it is that Q laces information out there. He can't give you national security information, but he can ask you questions that prompt you to kind of be thinking along things, and that's what he does. Building the wall, what does that do? A couple of things. First of all, if there's a wall down there and most of the drugs are coming in through the Mexican border, then he, without having to man it, is going to cut down on a lot of this opium trade that he's destroying over in Afghanistan. And then, so if he puts a wall down there, then it's going to make it that much more difficult for the deep state, shadow government, the globalists, whatever you want to call them, to be able to get the drugs into the United States. And the United States is the honeypot. This is where they make all their money, right here. So that's one thing that building the wall does. Another thing it does is it will, for the foreseeable future, destroy any plans that globalists might have to try to create a passable border, because it's permanent. That's what he's doing out there. So long after Trump's gone, he built the Trump wall down there, and at least, even if nobody mans it, it's going to be a formidable obstacle for anybody to try to come across that border long after he's gone. That's why it's important. But the globalists don't want that. They want passable borders. Globalists use terrorists and the U.S. military to control other countries and enforce the value of the Federal Reserve dollars on those who attempt to leave the system. That's what happened to Saddam. Saddam in 1999 says, I'm not going to take Federal Reserve currency anymore. I'm going to go to the euro. Well, next thing you know, you've got all these messages about weapons of mass destruction. 2003, here comes an invasion, throw him out, and they kill him. And that's what happened there. Trump is using the military to kill the bankers' terrorists and to warn state sponsors of terror working with the bankers to get out of the terror business, or he will use the military on them. The first trip that Trump made overseas, where did it go? You remember?
Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. Went to Saudi Arabia, because that's the hotbed. That's where the terrorists have been trained. And our representatives have been paid to train them. I mean, this is nuts, but that's what's been going on. So the first trip was to Saudi Arabia. He put the law down to them. He told them, you are going to stop this, or the U.S. military will do something about it. And ever since then, they've been arresting people right and left in Saudi Arabia that happened to be part of that cabal that was organizing the international Islamic terror groups. Globalists make money off of trade deficit. This is one of the things that people don't understand. Globalists make money off the trade deficit. Trump is blocking their profits by matching opposing trade barriers in other countries with those of our own and renegotiating existing trade deals to make them fair for the American people. This is how this works. The trade deficit, there's only so many dollars floating around inside our country. Right now it's about $14 trillion floating around in our currency supply. Well, if you take 800 billion of those every year and you ship them out and they don't come back, which is what the trade deficit is, then rather than 14 trillion, you got 13 trillion 200. It creates demand for borrowed funds. And so what we're doing is we're borrowing dollars from the central banking system, going into debt. This is why our national debt keeps going up, because the government does the same thing. It's why our personal debt keeps going up. Personal debt plus national debt is up to $70 trillion now. And it keeps going because the system commands that it happen. They don't print the money to pay the interest, so you have to keep borrowing. So as long as the dollars are leaving and going into other countries, then that creates more demand for us to borrow more dollars that are printed out of the air by the banks on Wall Street. And that's why Wall Street loves the biggest trade deficit they can have. And that's why Donald Trump is really messing with them. He is really messing with them, and that's why he's doing it. Globalists hope to make money controlling the world trade and the currencies for international transactions. Trump stopped the TPP as a first order of business, because they've got to have that TPP to go along with the TPIP and the TISA in order to create this model that's going to essentially control the world. That's what that is. It's the Constitution for a world corporate government. Those three documents put together, executed by all these producer nations of the world, construct the Constitution for a world corporate government. Well, he said, he took the TPP and he ripped it up. And it really made him mad. They didn't like that at all. Globalists hope to make money off charging the American people carbon taxes, owning the entities that would receive those taxes and would launder them back to the bankers and those who work for the banker henchmen. Trump walked away from the Paris Climate Accord, which is nothing but a big Brinks truck parked in front of the U.S. Treasury ready to haul off the American wealth. He's really making them mad. You see why they hate him? You see why they're going to these crazy, crazy lengths to try to get him out? I mean, if he would just show up in the middle of the street, he'd be a dead man in a heartbeat. But that's why they want him out of there, because he's really messing with them. Globalists want to tax you at the highest rate, stealing your wealth that much faster. Trump lowered taxes to the levels not seen in any of our lifetimes. So he's really messing with them. Globalists want to control American health care through Obamacare. Trump destroyed the funding mechanism of Obamacare. That was in the tax cut. They no longer can tax you to pay for Obamacare. He did that. That's what Trump has done. Globalists vow never to allow the Keystone Pipeline, oil drilling in the Arctic and offshore. Trump got all three done and is making America energy independent. Why would it be so important that we don't have access to that oil that's going to be flowing down through the Keystone Pipeline? You see, part of the thing that keeps the globalist system going is the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is held, its value is dependent on the value of oil on the world market. So you flood the world with oil, the value of the U.S. dollar goes down, plus the U.S. military historically has been enforcing the value of the dollar, requiring people to buy oil from OPEC using the U.S. dollar. They couldn't use any other currency. So all this is a way of flooding the world, which is antithetical to what the globalist bankers want. They want to be able to control the value of the dollar themselves. Globalists see the event horizon, the fact that the world will no longer need their only product, pieces of paper and numbers on computer screens, to conduct their domestic and international trade. Trump is cutting the bankers' source of funding while removing rules and regulations that inhibit smaller banks from competing. That was what he did earlier last year. All of the banking regulations that were trying to crowd out all of the smaller banks in favor of the larger banks. Remember the S&L crisis? Remember all that? It was all part of this, to get rid of the competition for the banks. That's how that happened in the first place. They created a crisis. Now this is a biggie right here. Anybody heard about an executive order that Trump signed back on the 21st of December? Anybody heard about that? Well, look this up. Just do a search for executive order blocking private property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. I didn't have the executive order number here. But in this, Trump identifies, he declares a national emergency. Now, what? Did NBC tell you that our president just declared a national emergency? No. No, nobody's going to tell you this. One of the things you could do is set up, is just check the whitehouse.gov for executive orders and find out the kind of stuff he's doing. So it was probably a month later that I found out about this. So what he's done is he's set up because he declared a national emergency, that gives him emergency powers to deal with it according to the laws of national security. And it allows him to freeze the assets of anyone involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. Now, who has been corrupt lately? So Trump, on the 21st of December, signed this executive order that gave him these potentially extreme powers in order to do various things. And what I found out very interesting is that the very next day, the CEO of Google quit. Anybody remember that? CEO of Google quit that day. And there's been all kinds of people quitting what they've been doing ever since then. We have members of Congress that are quitting. And I'll show you one in just a second, show you why he's quitting too. So we got, going back to the national stage here, right now we got 3 different areas in the world that have been really violent and unpredictable. One of them is North Korea. Well, Kim's ready to say, hey, we're good, I'm gonna do what I feel like has happened here. Now, I guess everybody heard that Pompeo last week went and sat down with Kim. Well, before that, I mean, even back during the Olympics, remember that? He was just quiet as a church mouse. And do you know, did you hear that he took a train ride to meet with President Xi in China? So the president of North Korea didn't get on a plane. You remember it's Larry McDonald. He didn't get on a plane, he went on a train and went down to China and then came back on a train. That's kind of weird. Well, I think what has happened, I think Trump, but looking back at that executive order here, he's been able to freeze assets of whoever has been his puppet master. You think about this, he's been completely irrational, but the guy is Western educated. He was educated in Switzerland. Talk about Kim Jong-un. He's Westernized. So I think what Trump has been able to do is unplug the power that has been making him act so crazy and erratic. I think he's been able to successfully do that and offer him protection. Say, okay, these guys are not going to bother you. We're going to take care of you here, but you got to act right. I think that's what's going on. So the next thing we got is Syria. Now, anybody ever seen this picture? Anybody ever seen this picture? John McCain and these guys around him? These are all members of ISIS here. This was like 3 years ago, I guess, when this came out. Well, notice these spider webs and stuff back in here. For some reason, that's important. See, this is from Q. What he's saying here, whenever they're talking about McCain, they call him no name, because that was the person that Trump said, I'm not going to tell you his name, but he voted against this thing. Remember that? He was talking to in one of his rallies. So no name is McCain. We love phones. Evidently, he took these pictures on his phone. And they have access to your phone. So they were able to get these pictures that McCain's phone had taken. So here it is. This is all from Q. We were talking about Q just a minute ago. This is all recent stuff that had to do with the missile attack on Syria. So let's look at it just a second. First of all, here's the identities of all these guys right here. One specifically is this guy right here. These guys are members of ISIS back in here. That guy, number 2, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, he's the head of ISIS. Guy right there with John McCain right in front of him. So now this guy right here, he flies back and forth between D.C. and the Middle East. He's the one that's conveying their orders, what to do here. We're going to see him again in just a second. His name is Muaz Mustafa. That's his name. So McCain's with ISIS members in Damascus, and Mustafa on the right is the intermediary between ISIS and the deep state intelligence. That's this guy right here. So here's Q, and he puts this stuff out, and it's really cryptic, and if you just look at it, you go, this doesn't make any sense. Well, it's something you can't know what it all means, but you can put it together kind of after the fact and know what he's saying. So he's saying, pictures leaked for this very moment. The very moment he's talking about was last week when Trump was about to send missiles into Syria here. I'm giving you a plausible reason why Trump did this. I don't know if it's really the reason, but there's been evidence since then to point us in this direction. It says, who, what is not pictured? I don't know what that means. Contractors. These are contractors. ISIS, they're all contractors. They're on our payroll. They're on the United States payroll. We're paying them, either through our tax dollars or through all of these dollars that the deep state gets through world drug trade. One way or the other. They're hired over there. Just like Al-Qaeda took out Gaddafi. Obama hired Al-Qaeda to take out Gaddafi in Libya in 2011. They're contractors, deep state contractors. So we've got special contractors. These guys are very special contractors. And it says, look at this, it says exact location, exact location, exact location, spider web markers. See these spider webs back in here? Obviously, maybe, that they were able to identify where this was taken, which was somewhere in Syria, which likely was a command and control center for ISIS, which is really the government, the United States government was trying to take out Assad. So they trained all these ISIS fighters in Saudi Arabia and put them fighting both in Iraq to take out that government again, as well as Syria. ISIS, the Islamic State, Iraq, and Syria. That's what it stands for. Because they went both directions. They came out of training in western Jordan, and part of them went up to take out Assad. The other part started wreaking havoc back in 2014 in Iraq. That's what all that was all about. So I get the impression that from this, they zeroed in on where that was, and I think that Trump just blew it sky high. That's what I think. I might be wrong. I don't know. But that's what this seems to be telling us. Now look who's with this guy. Why do you think Paul Ryan's leaving office? He's a young man. He's Speaker of the House. Why? Why would he be leaving the House? Well, if you're going to be Speaker of the House, you know, I mean, remember Denny Hastert? I mean, these are compromised people who get up that high in the U.S. government, in my opinion. And he's been in on all this time. He's sitting there taking a picture with this emissary from ISIS, the communications guy between ISIS and the deep state. That's why I believe he's leaving. And why are all the rest of these Republican and Democrats, where are they leaving? We got like 30 of them leaving the House of Congress right now. Just out of the blue. Well, I think they're all like that. I don't know. but I think they are, but this pretty well proves it. So this is just more evidence of that Q is real. This was from back in April the 8th. The attack, I think, was on April the 7th. Oh no, I know what it was. The supposed chemical attack, whether there was or wasn't, was on April the 7th. April the 8th, this authorization B19-2 will later on what date it was, but recently there was an order for 2 U.S. Air Force B-1 Lancer bombers launching 19 missiles. That was in Trump's response. So it seems like to me that Trump decided to launch the missiles the next day. It took him a while to get over there, and that's when they lost those missiles. I don't know, but that's interesting. He's been saying April showers. He's been saying Iran is next. So you got North Korea, you got Syria, you got Iran. Those are the 3 countries in the world that the deep state doesn't have, or that have been causing problems here. Now, very interesting is that Syria and Iran are 2 nations that remain that do not trade with U.S. dollars. Coincidence? No. No, absolutely not. That's what it's all about. Because once the entire colonial system of the British Empire, the Dutch colonial system, the French, it was all built upon this idea that if you could get the people using your currency, well, and you can print the currency out of the air, then you own the country. That's how they did that for all those hundreds of years. So anyway, he's repeatedly saying trust POTUS, and he gives you various clues as to what's going on here. Some of them are more understandable than others. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question about one other congressman who has left?
Okay.
And that's Jason Chaffetz. Is there any connection, or have you seen any connection in all the research that you've done?
I don't have anything concrete. I really don't know. I see a picture of Paul Ryan with ISIS smiling. And so
that does
that's a
kind of
natural inference there. Everybody else, it just seems like it's awfully weird. That here it is, we're on the culmination of really destroying the opposition, and all these people are dropping off the planet. That, to me, they're probably compromised.
It does make.
But I don't know about Jason Chaffetz. Okay, so this
I always assumed that it was because they could become a lobbyist and make the big money. Then.
Well, it could be, but you know, things are changing in that regard too. So I don't know. I really don't know. I just you see it happening and you kind of wonder, but you don't really know. But this is, you know, this is pretty famous little clip here of when they blew up the Nazi symbol on top of the Brandenburg Gate. And this is the way I end this presentation, to show you what existed and what Donald Trump is attempting to do with his enemies.
All right.
I firmly believe that the evidence is there that Donald Trump has his ways of doing things, and they're not our ways. I mean, that's why he's a multi-billionaire, and that's why we're here in this room, I guess. I don't know, but there's a difference between Donald Trump and us in the way that he thinks and the way that we think. But the evidence is there that I believe Donald Trump is going after these people with not reckless abandon, it's very well thought through. Here's the other thing. You put on a post out, and I should have grabbed it and thrown it in here, but a recent post of probably 30 of the top brass in the United States military. They're in the Oval Office with him, with General Mattis, and with Vice President Pence. They're all staying there, and they've got the United States military on both sides. If a bomb had gone off then, you know, the franchise would be over. That's who these people were. And I believe he was sending a message from that. The United States military is behind Trump, regardless of what happens. They are protecting them. And they ultimately would be the enforcers, if it comes right down to it, to put these people out of business. That's what I think. That's what I draw from that picture, because there's no other reason for him to do that. So, I know we've run kind of long, I know it's kind of a long presentation, but, yeah, good there? Yeah, you're good.